When in the course of human history, it becomes necessary for one group of people to separate all the political bonds with another, well, all hell breaks loose. I have with me today Vít, the president of Liberland. Vít, please tell the world more about yourself, but who you are, what you're doing, and most importantly, why. Please.
I'm Vít Jedlička. I'm the guy that started Liberland some 2.5 years ago. And I'm trying to spark a decent global movement, a new kind of American revolution for globally more freedom. And that's the mission that I've been working on long before Liberland started, actually. I started a number of think tanks. I was pushing a number of initiatives to lower the regulation, lower the taxes. I co-founded a political party, a libertarian political party in Czech Republic, but none of it really seemed too efficient, right? I understand there are two ways how to make some real political change, and those are, first of all, by technology and by entrepreneurship, and that's where the people with the crypto community are going, and that's what I'm very supportive of. And second of all is really to start new systems from scratch, rather than fighting the existing ones, because it's simply easier to start a new country than to change an existing one. So we are heading to have we're going to have almost 500,000 people on board after these 2 years, which I think is a very nice diaspora. It's already a small nation, not a micronation. And we are heading to have, we're going to have almost 100.
Yeah, something's happening.
It seems there was some power surge in the hotel.
Right.
And we're gonna have a decent relations with a couple of countries already, which is a landmark which similar projects like Liberland have never reached. And I think we are so far the most successful movement to start a new country out of scratch in this century.
Yeah, fascinating. I've heard about this project about a year ago, and when I first heard about it, that exact concept of start a new system to make the older obsolete was the exact reason I saw the vision behind it and the longevity behind it, as opposed to turning the system inside out or rising for the ranks or whatever. It's like, yeah, it's too long. It's just a much more smarter, cutting-edge way is to create something completely new and completely different that challenges the status quo. One of my mentors told me was change the status quo. That's a very powerful principle. But I'm very curious, though. What was the thought process behind starting your own country? Did you wake up on a Monday morning and think this, or was it like through a series of events? And what was the process?
I actually clearly remember the time when I was a really small kid, and I was thinking, there is this problem. After reading Bastiat and many other books, when I was roughly 14, I was thinking there is so much space on this planet, yet most of it is occupied by countries with a shitty jurisdiction that are overregulated and overtaxed. Just give me a piece of land and I will show you how freedom works. And notion kind of stick with me for another 15 years. And to a point where we really decided seriously we're going to start a new country. So we're looking into international regulation. We're looking in the history of other state startups, and the ones especially which became successful, places like, for example, Singapore, places like Hong Kong, especially small countries, how they were dealing with the bigger countries on their borders like Monaco. And we learned from that history, and we tried to really put together the best experiences to make Liberland fully happen.
Yeah, I remember hearing about the Prince of Liechtenstein, not Hans Christian Andersen, the second.
Yes, Hans Adam the second.
That's it. He talked about how Liechtenstein sought advice from Switzerland during the Second World War on what to do in statehood. And I've heard him talk once or twice about his book, The State in the 22nd or 21st Millennium,
yep,
and all about small government and the whole concept behind that. You mentioned bastiat just then briefly. I was reading through the brochure, This one here, quite a rare one, I suppose, soon, but this one you gave me yesterday. And you mentioned Bastiat. In what way influenced by him, please?
I really realized, the people just believe that the states, usually when they are not into libertarianism, they don't understand that the state basically doesn't have any money of its own, that it's always the money of the taxpayers. And somehow they don't understand that whenever the state spends money, it's basically their own money, which the state has taken from them in the first place. And I also realized that, again, the main notion of that book is that the law itself has changed from something that was supposed to protect people into something that was constantly robbing them of their wealth and was redistributing that wealth mostly to people that by no means deserved that. And we've got all these oligarchs, all these large interest groups that are parasiting on the state these days, and people cherish it. They even vote for it in election. There is a crazy situation with a person that takes most governmental subsidies being also a prime minister now in Czech Republic. So everything is hand in hand now, and the crazy thing is that with just a little bit of proper marketing, you can sell to the people even a piece of hell for that the people actually support it. And that's what is happening in Czech Republic. The police state powers are ever increasing, the governmental controls are increasing, yet the people on the top are legally robbing the rest of the society. And that's what's the problem with the law. And that's what Bastiat was writing about in that book, almost 250 years old, which is almost like he wrote it today, right?
Yeah, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yes, but especially, this thing that people simply don't realize, that the laws, and it's very much the truth. I was following how the laws are being created both in European Parliament and on national level. There is very rarely any law passed to fix some real problem. 90% of the laws that are going through EU Parliament now are some sort of lobbies to put money from pockets of one group to a pocket of another group. And the problem is that usually that those are not too big money for an individual, right? It's just a couple of pennies for carbon tax, or it's not too bad, to exchange your light bulbs. It's just a couple pounds per each new light bulb. But on the other hand, you've got these corporations that are making billions. So the ability to protect society, to protect itself from this robbery which is happening through legislation is very limited because the power is dispersed. But on the other hand, you've got the powers of corporations, which is pretty centralized and which is hand in hand with politicians that basically just sign the papers that the corporations are bringing them. And there is a great movie, by the way, which I would recommend you to see about light bulbs, which goes through how the laws behind the...
Something went wrong there.
How did they actually came about, how Osram... Hello?
Yeah, what was the name of the film, please?
I know only the Czech version, but I'll send you the link later. And it's a great movie which describes how Osram was able to push through a completely crazy legislation and make billions of dollars, and actually poison most of the households that we are living in, because of course only the light bulbs they were offering at the time were made out of mercury.
Yeah, I'll endeavour to include that film link in the show notes below. But please, Vít, speaking of power and lobbyists, money and beyond, Liberland, I'm very curious, what's happening with it and how is it going to function? Because I think it's an interesting analogy how you had a power surge just then, a few minutes ago. How is Liberland going to handle power? And yesterday when we were in London, right around the corner from the venue was the Houses of Parliament. So on one side of the street, literally, there's the UK government. On the other side of the road, there's a small advocacy of libertarianism and beyond, hidden away underground. Literally.
Yeah, well, the great thing about Great Britain is that there is still a notion for liberty. Like there is still a little bit of a spirit of American Revolution also within. Unlike other many countries, even in the United States, there is still this freedom movement kind of living here, and the fact that Great Britain made it out of the EU is a example of that, right? But of course, the nation state itself and even Britain is again completely overregulated, overtaxed. It needs a radical changes to unleash the real potential of the society, which is being systematically damaged by that. And I was just giving an example yesterday as well about how basically EU regulations that slow economic growth by 3.5%, how they damage a half of the whole continent every single 20 years. It's virtually like destroying or dropping atomic bomb on half of EU if you consider the invisible destruction created by the overregulation. And that number, 3.5%, doesn't come from me. It actually comes from European Commission. So yes, we've got this real problem, which is both on national and international level. And Liberland simply starts from scratch. So we've got almost zero regulations. We've got voluntary tax system. And that's not a new idea. Of course, Ayn Rand was advocating for it. But also the founding fathers of the United States were playing with the concept. But I think now with the new technologies, with the blockchain technologies, it's actually very easy to do and it's feasible at the end. Because we will have completely voluntary tax system, but whenever you pay taxes, you become a shareholder of the country that you're living in. So it's not just that the state will say thank you. No, you will also be an integral part of the society that you're living in, and you will have the decision power equal to your shares that you're accumulating. And I think that's the biggest thing, which, if proven correct as a concept, could really change the political atmosphere on the whole planet within a very short time.
Yeah, you mentioned the European Union then. What came to mind straight away was the Rahn curve, where there's a direct correlation between government spending and like a lack of GDP growth, where the less the government spends, the higher the growth is. That just came to mind then. And you mentioned the voluntary tax system. Could you please elaborate on how that's going to work?
Yes, so there are no taxes in Liberland. But if you want to become a citizen, you have to accumulate some sort of merits for it. So we've got our own tokens, which people basically have to accumulate either through finances or through help or support of Liberland. And those merits are not just a currency. They can also become shares of the state. So whenever you pay taxes to Liberland, you're exchanging your work or your finances for shares of Liberland. And the state of Liberland will only disperse 10% of these shares a year. So there will be a natural scarcity of that. There will be maximum 700 million merits ever created. And the thing when you pay your taxes, basically your voluntary tax, the state, Liberland, will exchange your finances for merits, and those merits become law. So we will be only able to spend 10% of those money a year, but you will get a voting right, you will get a dividend, and you will also basically get a collateral for your behavior within the Liberland jurisdiction. So we're solving here a number of things. One of them is, the fact that we are combining the shareholdership in a time when. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Talking about shareholdership in a time.
Yeah, I see that there is no connection. It shows me. Yeah, so that's it's a brand new concept. We're combining the best elements of corporation and republic, and basically monarchy with that system. So I think it is a system that can be viable, and it is a result of us thinking hard about Liberland could work and how it should be the future of the statehood.
Yeah, interesting you mentioned the laws as well, because I was reading through the journal the pamphlet here, and it talked about how, in order for Liberland to be officially recognised as a country, there has to be some level of governance. In terms of, we talked about drug production, and you also talked about criminal extradition. So Liberland would have policies like that in order to be recognised and respected in the international community. Otherwise, it's not really a nation in sense. It's more like it's just it's not serious. Then it's just like, oh yeah, just an unclaimed land, like the land between Egypt and Sudan. It's just something's happening there, but it's not really a nation in and of itself. And
well, the thing is that the nation in itself is a group of people. It's like a club. All the nations are basically clubs, that's now nothing. That's the way it is, right? Some nations have their countries, other nations don't have their countries. So just to separate the state from the nation, those are two different concepts. And we do have 500,000 people that are basically our diaspora, people that are claiming Liberland citizenship, but we deem them as Liberland nationals, people that are liberty-oriented, that follow what are we doing. They want to become members. They want to become citizens of Liberland. So, there is, of course, a huge difference between Liberland and all these other projects. The followers are so numerous. But, of course, we have to fulfill a Montevideo criteria. But the good news is that we are already fulfilling them. The Chicago Journal of International Law argues that the only thing which prevents us from fulfilling all the criteria, and the last criteria, of course, that we are missing is a full control over the territory, is the fact that Croatia arrests violently everybody that is coming to Liberland. Yet they are not claiming it. So because of this criteria cannot be fulfilled because of a direct violence against Liberlanders, we actually, by the definition or by the principles of international law, actually follow the criteria, because that criteria is not possible to fulfill just because of violent action by Croatia.
So, as I remember it, Serbia is quite supportive.
Yes, they stated they don't mind creation of Liberland on this territory, and it doesn't belong to Republic of Serbia. And they stated it only 11 days after we started the country.
So 24th of April 15.
Yep.
And what's the dilemma with Croatia? Do they see it as a threat, or is it not in their national interest? Or what do you think is the problem there?
Well, of course, we are breaking the status quo. They see us now, because we've got their internal documents, they see us as one of the biggest threats currently to the Croatia, which is a bit strange because we are the greatest opportunity, I think, that the country got in the long run. Croatia has a deep economic issues. They will reach the economic output of 2008 in 2020. So there is basically a stagnation for 12 years of its development. It's amazing how the country got conserved and is one of the slowest growing economy in Europe for so long time. And of course, the unemployment is high, and we are solving all that. We are bringing a lot of capital. We are bringing a lot of people that are interested in employing other people, and we could probably raise the GDP per capita of Croatia by 1% a year if Liberland gets to construct.
Just to construct?
Gets to construct first buildings, basically. The only thing that we need from Croatia is not that they would recognize us, is not that they would...
Oh dear. All right, so yeah, you were talking about construction, please, Vít. Construction.
No, I was saying that the only problem that we've got with Croatia is that we don't need them to recognize us. We don't need them to support us. We just need them to back off and to get out of the territory that they don't claim. Basically, go back to their borders as they have claimed them and have them on all of their maps. And so I don't think it's that much that we are asking for. We just want to live on the place that we have picked 2.5 years ago.
I see, and I'm very curious. Let's talk timeline as well, please, because you said the only thing that left, the only tick box is Croatia. And I was looking through this this pamphlet, and I look at some of the architects, some of the ideas, and some of them had, the one that was interesting had different layers. So everything was 20 minutes away from each other. There's no need for roads, or public transport, which I think is the future anyway, in regards to AI and self-driving cars. And other one was like a city, but there was some reason in the concept art there was flying cars, which is, hey, it's doable. But what's the timeline of events, do you think? What do you predict for
we are actually planning multiple events this year that I can tell you right away. The 13th of April is the biggest thing this year, which is the launch of our token. It is something which I've been postponing actively for 2 years, but I think it's a good time to do it right now. And the other is the big conference that is coming up. Then we've got a big festival in August, people coming to Liberland. We're bringing more ships. We'll be able to host a couple hundred people on the borders of Liberland, directly on Danube. So it will be very nice scenery with all these people. We're bringing much more fun stuff. Yesterday, we got a new sauna and new whirlpool coming to Liberland. So there is a small civilization growing on the Danube River next to Liberland. And I think it's a cool that all of this is possible and it's happening. But we also need to finalize our justice system, finalize our registers, make sure that the companies that are established in Liberland have all the necessary things to do.
Yeah, the justice system, finalizing some things.
Yep. I was talking about that's one of the key things this year. We need to also finalize our justice system. Liberland is supposed to take care only of security, justice, and diplomacy. Only three things that are very much minarchist within the minarchist ideology. But we actually want to go even further. We want to have decentralized justice system. So we want to use blockchain technologies to be able to make the judgments about different cases. We're working together with Kleros to make it happen. It's a startup which specializes in that. We are having our own police units working in a way like Uber does, but also on a decentralized platform, an arcade city. So that's the plan for this year as well, to not just make an Android app, which we have, but also run it in a decentralized way. And our diplomacy is growing fairly steadily. We also want to make them so that they work in lines with the technology available in the 21st century. But diplomacy is more about personal relations with the key people in other countries. So that's probably the thing that will become very well conservative build.
Would I be right in thinking, when you say minarchist, it's the referee, the government is, Liberland government is purely the referee and nothing else?
Well, pretty much that's the case. We are just helping to run these three areas: justice, security, and diplomacy. And our government is limited by the constitution to stick with these three areas.
Yeah, and what about the constitution as well? Because when I looked into it about a year ago, 10 months ago, something like that, it hadn't been ratified. No. And I heard it's changed a little bit since then.
Yes, because of those new technologies, because of the blockchain technology, because of the autonomous government, basically, decentralized autonomous government on the planet. So that must be integrated into the first constitution that was written. But the spirit of the constitution will remain the same. So we will probably not have a parliament. Rather, instead of that, we will have this shareholding structure, which will make the decisions. We will probably not have the justice or the court system of courts as was proposed. Instead, we will have a decentralized system of courts on blockchain that will work. And I think, the great thing about this is that it can work both in and out of Liberland. People can use Liberland justice without being in Liberland. People will be able to use Liberland diplomacy without being in Liberland, and the same could also at the end apply for the security. The Liberland security forces could be anywhere on the planet.
Remind me, is the term of president 6 years still?
Not well. The first president has a different position, right? But there is no president in the constitution. If you read, there is a chancellor, but that's probably not even going to happen. I will be the first and last president, and I would really like to make the DAO work and operate by itself. From the rules that we have set up, it will take 7 years before I will lose control or the main say in Liberland, which I think is a decent time to make things run.
Yeah, well, I'm curious then, because it's happened a few times while you're there. Power and agriculture. One of my concern, and the floodplain as well, just the logistics behind it. Liberland is a small peninsula almost, and it's on the floodplain. How is the DAO, how is the Liberland in general going to handle the floods and as well as the winters and the summers?
That's why we're also, we are having the boats for multiple reasons there. One of them is, of course, the flooding. So sometimes the flood comes, and it's not too different from Prague. Every 10 years there is a flood that goes over a large part of the historical center of Prague. Now they have finally built a very high barrier, so it probably is not going to happen again. But yes, the flood is a problem from some respect, but not really. Technologically, is not a problem. There are many ways.
Okay.
But right now, we're solving it by making all the structures floating in the waters right next to Liberland.
But what comes to mind then straight away is Venice, somehow floating or built on the river.
That's possible. There is a bit of a problem. The Danube fluctuates almost 6 meters up and down, which is a fairly big difference. So sometimes it goes over the buildings that are there for most of the year without being touched, and sometimes there is a lot of shores. The great thing about the shores of Liberland, it's no mud. Everything is a pure white sand, which is a pretty cool thing and makes the summers in Liberland very pleasurable.
And what about agriculture though? Because food, unless we go for aquaponics or agroponics, we're going to struggle a little bit with the farmland, especially if there's calls for an airport there. Importing and trade embargoes, blockades, risk?
I'm not worried about that. First of all, it's very hard to blockade us because we are on Danube River, which is the international waterway. That's why we have free access to Liberland, basically. We don't have to grow food. There is all our neighbors are growing food on a large fields. It's one of those agriculturally richest part of Europe's. Both Hungary, Croatia, Serbia, everywhere are fields and people are growing stuff. I'm not worried about that. And of course, the state is not going to impose any policy on self-sustainability in terms of food.
One thing I'm also curious about is the way the tax system works. In the Constitution, it said that there's no debt, which I like that. I think that's very stoic in nature. Very good, stringent way of saying, we're not beholden to anyone. But also at the same time, raising capital, it forces you to be more creative in terms of providing services. And the only things that I can imagine right out the bat are things like border entry and basic fines, and preferably not things like speed cameras or traffic lights, but £50 to enter and leave the country with a passport, stuff like that. What kind of services and what kind of services are you going to have to help fund the treasury?
Well, first of all, I think that the cryptocurrency that we are creating itself will be a great source of funding. Second of all, the fact that people will be paying voluntary taxes in order to become shareholders of Liberland, that's going to be another way and another incentive for people to pay taxes. But also, if you want to register a company now, it costs €500, and people are very keen to have their business in Liberland. So we do have some fees that are paid by the people that want to run business in Liberland, and we will keep them reasonably low. But it can be a great source of income. We can have 100,000 companies that bring €500 each. They can have just their virtual offices in Liberland, as is happening right now. and it can be a great source of revenue for Liberland.
And how are you incentivizing people to pay taxes? Because in theory, can't people just move there and pay nothing? But then they're going to miss out on something, aren't they?
They're not going to have a say in a positive sense. They're not going to make the decisions. They're not going to get the dividends that the country will create once it will sell the land. And Liberland, of course, has a great potential in terms of the value of the land. And it can very easily reach the levels of Monaco, where 1 square meters is 100,000 euro. And we are going from 0 to 100,000. So those money shouldn't be distributed for the state expenses. It should be distributed back to the shareholders.
Mm-hmm. I'm very curious also, this dividend, this is the first I've heard of that generally. What's that, like a quarterly? It's stakeholders and
there
shareholders.
There is a discussion about that. It will be either on a weekly basis or on a yearly basis. I think it would be actually interesting to do it on a yearly basis, just before another round of fundraising done by government is needed. So we will do the fundraising. We'll be basically offering people to pay voluntary taxes just before the dividend happens. That would also be a great way how to get more people on board.
And also about the ICO, you mentioned there's only going to be 700 million of I'm guessing, merit token. How do people get involved in that?
Well, everybody that contributed to Liberland so far got these merits. They will be in this frozen stage. I don't like to call them locked anymore. We call them staked merits because that's much more explanatory. So all the people that contributed so far will have them in the staked regime, so like locked in a smart contract where they can only spend 10% a year. But we will allow other people to buy the non-staked merits, just the regular cryptocurrency. So they could just speculate on the fact that the value of Liberland crypto will go up, and they don't have to have any ties or any binding. But when they don't have that tie, in a sense that they would stake their merits, they will not have a say about the future of Liberland.
Yeah, and speaking of the future, we're in 2018 now. Between now and 2030, what are you worried about? What are you concerned? What's your doubts? What are you concerned with the future?
Actually, I don't have any doubts, and I'm not really concerned about anything. I'm very excited about the future. So, I'm very happy. How fast and it's just 10 times bigger than we expected Liberland to be. We had some initial expectations, and they were completely. We went through the roof instead of reaching those expectations.
And what do you say to naysayers? So I've been to a few events, and people will just mention Liberland, and then the initial response will just be, it's not going to work. And that's generally all I hear about it. That's a very, very one-sided argument. But what do you say to the naysayers?
Well, I don't really meet that much of them. The good thing is that we've got 500,000 people that are applying for citizenship and that are positive about it. And it's a large group of people enough. And there are people that can really make things happen. I think we didn't get yet 5% of these people on board, like the game changers. It's up to us, of course, to integrate them. We only have a certain capacity to make things happen. I'm full-time traveling since Liberland started to get all the important people on board and not to miss any good opportunity to present Liberland. So right now I'm actually here on 2 big events here in London, which is a nice coincidence that that I could tie them together right after we are heading to Tenerife, right after going back to Liberland to organize some things for the summer, and then again flying around the world to make things happen. And also, right now, I'm really happy about the level of expansion. We actually had the similar amount of interest in the citizenship like we had at the beginning of Liberland this autumn. Just crazy, 30,000, 40,000 people a month applying for citizenship at one point. So the fact that our immigration is comparable to the immigration of the United States, which is 1 million people are coming to States each year, right? And we are having 500,000 people $1 million as a country, and of course we don't have a single decent infrastructure in Liberland yet. Yet the idea itself, the fact that there will be a large degree of freedom is so attractive to people that we can compare ourselves to the United States in the amount of people interested in the citizenship and in immigrating.
Yeah, and you mentioned, well, that's interesting because in the migrant crisis from Syria and other parts of the world, it's affected places like Hungary and Poland and elsewhere in the Balkans. I'm curious, what is Liberland's immigration policy going to be? Because
we are treating everybody the same.
right.
We don't care if you are from Syria or from UK or from Germany. The policy is still the same. People have to somehow help the country grow before they get citizenship. And we are also looking into how to help the people that are in problems, people in troubled countries. I've just recently been to a conference about refugees in Israel, and we're thinking how our representative office could actively help the region. We're building up strong relations with Somaliland, which is basically the first country that recognized Liberland, and we want to build something great there in collaboration with them. And I think it would be also a great place where a lot of these people that are from Middle East could easily migrate to and create a new society. And for me, that's one of those big things, big topics for this year, to actually not have just one Liberland, but have multiple of them around the world with support of other governments.
I think from a social sciences perspective, it's been a very interesting experiment seeing all these people from all sorts of parts of the world living together in a small area. But the fact that they all share the same or similar ideology is going to be an interesting variable in that experiment. It's going to be fascinating, certainly from that perspective, like a psychological perspective. But Vít, you mentioned Tenerife. As we slowly end the podcast, what's next for you and what are you up to?
Well, that's the big conference on Tenerife, and the main topic of that conference, which starts next Saturday, is how Liberland offices should function globally, how they should really help Liberland in its way for recognition, but on the other hand, how to really make some business in their areas, especially in the field of cryptocurrencies. So our office on Tenerife is very closely tied to a exchange / a cryptocurrency hub, which is now being created on Tenerife. And we have the same issue with number of our offices, that they're transforming themselves to a real physical places, which are quite vibrant in terms of doing business, not just diplomacy.
Yeah, interesting. So what's the best way for the audience to get in touch with you?
The best way, it's fairly easy. It's liberland.org. If people apply for citizenship, then they will get newsletters. But if they want to contact me directly, it's president@liberland.org. So fairly easy with email. I don't receive messages on Facebook anymore. It's just stuck, but LinkedIn works as well. So number of ways how people can contact me, and I'll be more than happy to reply to them. And I'm here, and I think it's probably the longest stay ever that I've been somewhere. I'm here working in London for 6 days on this blockchain week, but also in my hotel, because I needed time to finalize some things on the constitution and other organizational things before the ICO. But I'm also happy to meet people in the evenings. Most of the evenings are already occupied, but still there is a space to meet and get some things going.
Fascinating. Vít, thank you very much for coming on the show. I'll include those links in the show notes below.
Great, thank you.
And thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
So, ladies and gentlemen at home, remember that this world has infinite opportunities to go out there and do something remarkable with your life. Because that is what life is all about. Not being sat at home, but doing remarkable things to put a dent in the universe and change the world. That's the meaning of life, opportunity. How cool is that?
Pretty cool.